Most classic comic stories are large-scale, epic battles with the fate of humanity on the line in one way or another. After all, superheroes are larger than life, likened to the gods and heroes of ancient Greece and Rome. Even the more mild-mannered characters like Spider-Man are far from mundane or ordinary, and so the stories that they inhabit must also grow beyond the norm to fit with these somewhat boisterous personalities. Marvel's, on the other hand, goes in the opposite direction. Written by Kurt Busiek with painted art by Alex Ross, 1994's Marvel's might at first seem like a somewhat boring adventure in the Marvel Universe. Instead of focusing on the Herculean heroes, the lens of the story turns to the everyman of the Marvel Universe, embodied here by photographer Phil Sheldon, living through the battles of legends like the Fantastic Four and the Avengers. You know that one shot in the Avengers where the team finally assembles and stands together for the first time? The music swells and the enemies encroach from all sides. It would be like if Joss Whedon had just decided to turn the camera around to face all the people who were running away in terror and just focused the rest of the movie on them. That's what Marvel's is, basically. In theory, this story sounds like it could be really boring. People read comics for superheroes, right? For action and adventure and intrigue, and overall, an escape from the doldrums of everyday life. Sure, humanistic connections are incredibly important in telling any story. That's why Spider-Man books are infused with such rich characters like Aunt May and J. Jonah Jameson. But we need more than that just to keep our interest, especially when you go into a book expecting to see your favorite heroes. But that's the magic of Marvel's. It's pulled off so well and tells one of the best superhero stories ever without even turning the lens to the superheroes at all. But how does it avoid the pitfalls inherent in such a seemingly boring setup? Well, first, we have to look at the art. It's just phenomenal. Each and every panel is a hand-painted masterpiece by Alex Ross, which instantly grounds everything that happens in the pages of the story in reality. It's like we're seeing the real world through photographs. If you were to apply any other art style to the story, it might come across as somewhat odd. While the situations and characters might be crafted to represent our reality, the art would still come across like a comic book, reminding us that it is in fact fiction. But with the hyper-realism that comes with Ross's art, it feels all the more real. We are on the streets with Phil Sheldon looking up at Giant Man. We are in the cab with him chasing after the Green Goblin as the villain kidnaps Gwen Stacy. It doesn't feel like we're missing out on the superhero action because it feels like that's just another fact of life. It's just gorgeous to look at and elevates the story to a whole other level entirely. But that's not all the art has to offer. The book is riddled with Easter eggs and cameos, which, for one, make the world feel more lived in, and two, makes it much more fun to read as we search for all the little things that we might have missed the first time around. For example, Clark Kent and Lois Lane show up a couple times throughout the book, and so does Billy Batson, otherwise known as the heroic Captain Marvel. The original that's owned by DC, not the Marvel one, as confusing as that is. Even Popeye gets a panel, the Sailor Man. And all the people look authentic to the times they are from. The story starts out in the late 1930s with the first appearance of the original Human Torch. And all the citizens are dressed and act like people from that era, even when they're just in crowds in the background. Later on, we move on to the 1960s, and once again, the outfits worn by the passerbys fit right in. This helps once more with contextualizing the story as one that's much more similar to reality than your average superhero fare in some over-the-top, fictionalized universe. The art is just one small component of what truly makes this book great, though. The thing that really pushes it over the edge into being a classic Marvel story is the writing. And there's a few reasons for that. For one, Kurt Busiek knows how to write realistic characters. There's never a moment where Phil Sheldon doesn't seem like someone you could pass on the street. The story starts in the year 1939, when Phil is just an enthusiastic young photographer, and he's written believably. By issue number 2, 20 years have passed to the first appearance of the Fantastic Four in 1961, and now Phil's more established with steady work from the Daily Bugle and a family. Again, he's written believably. We follow Phil over a period of more than 30 years, and every step of the way he feels like a real person. By making the main character so relatable, Busiek lets the story feel like more than just a superhero story, and we're able to invest for more than just punches and action. Marvel's is also steeped in the continuity of the Marvel Universe, which is potentially the most incredible thing about it. Nearly everything that happens involving the superheroes had already happened in a comic published decades prior. From the first appearance of the original Human Torch, to the coming of Galactus, to the Skrull-Kree War, to the death of Gwen Stacy. We're allowed to look at these stories that we know so well that have shaped the Marvel Universe as we know it from a new perspective. Reading the coming of Galactus story in Fantastic Four, issue number 48 to 50, gives us an epic adventure tale about a superhero family fending off a giant, planet-eating monster. But Marvel's lets us see just how traumatic an event like that would be for ordinary people. People just assume that they're going to die, it's the end of the world. And when they don't die, and when the world doesn't end, they wonder if it could all just be a hoax. Well, this is something touched on in the original comics. Marvel's gives it new depth, and fleshes it out more. Because of this, Marvel's is a story that could only be told in comics, and a story that could only be told in the Marvel Universe, to be specific. It turned the massive history of the shared universe, written by dozens of different people with thousands of different ideas, into a singular narrative, blending together everything so that it doesn't feel out of the ordinary. It doesn't feel like fiction, it feels like real life. And that's the marvel of Marvels. The details in the art and the details in the story give us this rich world in which the characters inhabit. It grounds it in reality without sacrificing the out-of-this-world science fiction and fantasy elements. Marvel has returned to the world of Marvels a couple times throughout the years, most notably in 2008's Marvel's Eye of the Camera, written by Busiek along with longtime Marvel scribe Roger Stern. Alex Ross left the project, at least partially because he just didn't want to draw Wolverine, so instead he was replaced by artist Jay Anacleto. The art is still painted, but it doesn't quite hold up to the vivid mastery that Ross displayed in the original, and is not nearly as groundbreaking since Ross had already drawn the original. Overall, Eye of the Camera is still pretty good, but it just doesn't feel like it was needed. The original Marvels has such a perfect ending that following Phil Sheldon anymore seems somewhat pointless. As part of the 25th anniversary of the series in 2019, Marvel also published Marvels Annotated. This miniseries reprinted the 4 issues of the original Marvels, while also sharing various behind-the-scenes elements such as scripts, sketches, and breakdowns of all the little nuggets of Marvel history that are strewn throughout the story. It's where I get a lot of the information from this video, and if you get the chance, I suggest checking this out. It really does expand on the story, and you get to read it like it's a whole new thing all over again. At this time, Marvel also released Marvel's Epilogue, a one-shot issue that introduces Phil Sheldon to the all-new, all-different X-Men of the mid-1970s. So poor Alex Ross had to draw Wolverine after all. It's a fun story that has all the best Marvel has to offer in it, but just like with Eye of the Camera, it didn't really need to happen, and the story kind of just sits well with the original 4 issues, and didn't need an epilogue of any sort. There's also the original plan for a sequel that would have followed a pair of brothers, who make a cameo in issue 4 of the main series. Unfortunately, following some disagreements with the editors, Busiek and Ross left the project, and other than 1995's Ruins, which is a somewhat depressing dystopian look at what the Marvel Universe could have looked like, there would be no sequel until the aforementioned Eye of the Camera. But Busiek and Ross, along with artist Brett Anderson, would use the basic ideas for the failed sequel in the arc of their creator-owned Astro City series, The Dark Ages. Astro City as a whole was clearly inspired heavily by Marvel's, as it too covers the world of superheroes from a street-level view. I'll probably cover all of this in another video somewhere down the line, so if you want to see that, then go ahead and tell me down in the comments and all the other YouTube stuff. Also, Marvel just recently released the first issue of a series called Marvel, which is supposed to represent Alex Ross's original vision for Marvels, a collection of short stories by top talent featuring any Marvel characters they wanted. But like I said, the first issue just came out, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet, so there's not much to say about it. But I also didn't really want to leave it out, because it is a part of the history of Marvels. So, that's all for today. Basically, I just wanted to say how much I love Marvels, and I thought I would break into a little bit more of a straight-up review setup for a video, instead of the usual theory and or history topics. If you liked it, then you know what to do. I just said it a few seconds ago. Anyway, I highly suggest you go pick up a copy of this. I tried to avoid as many spoilers as possible to preserve the experience, so go ahead and order it off of Amazon, or see if you can get it at a local comic store or your local library. Other than that, have a great day, and goodbye, everybody.